good night, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to the Black Consciousness Festival 2020. My name is Bernice, and with me is my co-host for tonight, Listia.
Welcome everyone. Tonight is our much anticipated Kompa workshop with the Maestro Ricky, Power Serge, and Fabrice Rouzier. We are grateful that your viewing audience can join us on Zoom and Facebook Live.
The Black Consciousness Festival is a global online platform for the commemoration, celebration, and sharing of vital histories and stories that boost the awareness and impact of the pride, power, and practice of people of African descent.
The festival is building awareness around how each of us can take the necessary steps for restitution and reparation. We now introduce to you our facilitators for this amazing cultural activity, Konpa music production.
Maestroricky is a composer, songwriter, producer, keyboard player, and singer. Born in Haiti, Jean-Michel Bien-Aimé, or Maestro Ricky, has been making thousands of people dance to the groove of his magical touch and sing along with his catchy melodies.
We also have with us, direct from Haiti, Fabrice Rouzier. Fabrice became playing the piano with his aunt Marguerite Bono at the age of 4. By 1984, he was playing and recording with musicians and producers including Hans Peters, Bobby Dennis, and Patrick Dijon. He has greatly influenced the development of a compas nouvelle generation and is greatly known as one of the Tubadou movement leaders for revitalizing the genre, along with Kiki Belizier.
And joining us a little later will be Serge, Power Serge Turnier. Known to be one of the most respected producers, recording engineer, DJ, event promoter, and radio personalities in the Haitian community.
We now join Maestro Ricky, Power Serge, and Fabrice Rouzier as they take us on this musical journey. We are ecstatic to have you all here tonight. Welcome to the Black Consciousness Festival, and thank you for sharing us with your expertise on Kompa music. Over to you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Hi, Fabrice, and all the way from Haiti here with us. It's an honor for me, a pleasure to be part of the Black Consciousness Festival 2020 and to share our Afro Caribbean values. And we're going to talk about compa music. And our goal here is to introduce to you the compa genre and its origin, how it evolved over the time, and how influential compa has been for many other music around in the Caribbean, French Caribbean particularly, and some part of Europe and South North America. And so we're gonna get into some elements of the music itself, okay, how it is built. And I could not be more honored because I have with me to present it to you one of the legendary musician of Haitian culture, compa in particular, Fabrice Rouzier, and he has a very large pedigree. Who's been my mentor in musically, and so it's an honor for me to have Fabrice in this journey with me. And later on, we'll have Power Surge, a new generation producer who's done a lot nationally and also internationally. So we're gonna have fun, and we're gonna talk about compa music. And Fabrice, a couple of words before we start.
Well, thank you for having me. Hi, ladies. I'm deeply honored to be part of this. Compa has been part of my life for the past 50 years at least. But it's also been part of many people's lives around the world, but particularly in the Caribbean. And it is also the reason that links us with most Black communities around the world also. So I'm tremendously happy to be part of this, and I'm looking forward to learn a few more things about compa today. All right, so back to you, Ricky.
Okay, so Fabrice, let's bring the people back to the 1950s. 1950s in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince. There are music are playing, and the type of music that drives the people around, the types of music that are playing in the nightclubs and everything, it's more of a influential music, kind of music coming from abroad, like the cha-cha coming from Cuba, and there have been the what they call the Haitian merengue, which was a kind of merengue coming from the Dominican Republic and other countries in the around. But then there's this musician Nemours Jean-Baptiste, who've been playing in different bands like the Atomique, for example, who was playing this type of music, then decided to make some changes and created its own, and then Compa was born. But I wanted to ask you, are you familiar with the type of music that were playing at the time before Nurmu came in and changed a little bit?
Absolutely. Nemours actually was, he also came from poor origins, and you have to understand that the history of Haitian music is deeply intertwined with the trade of sugar. And as you know, Hispaniola or Saint Domingue, which is the island that shares Haiti, and that Haiti shares with the Dominican Republic, was very well known during the colonization of the French for its sugarcane production. But when Haiti became an independent country, of course, all the sugarcane producing, traveled to Cuba and traveled also to the Dominican Republic. Uh, Along with that, there was a big need for people to come and cut that sugarcane and process it, and that's the Haitians that were really at the time of their independence, they were not really well seen by their neighbors, especially the neighbors from the north, the Americans. So the country was under pretty much an economic embargo. So you had a poor population, and then to make do to pretty much survive, they had to travel to Cuba and the Dominican Republic for to work in the sugarcane plantations, because these countries became really rich and powerful because of the sugarcane production. But along with the sugarcane that they want to cut, of course, they would bring out of Haiti, the rhythms that they had, mostly rhythms that came from Africa, because we were mostly a country that was also built on slavery. And in Cuba, of course, they would find rhythms brought from Africa also, but also Spanish rhythms that they would bring back to Haiti when the harvest was done. They would do the same thing also in the Dominican Republic. So you had like a bunch of African rhythms that were brought from Western Africa that found themselves in Haiti, that were mixed with the French mazurka, and they were deeply influenced also at the time by the Latin rhythms. So in the 40s and the 50s, some people will tell you that this was the golden age of Haitian music. Because you had very famous musicians coming from all over, especially from Cuba and from America, to come to Haiti and exchange with Haitian musicians at the time. So in before compa music, essentially, you had the big bands from Havana, and whatever they could get from shortwaves from the US. This is what the music of Haiti was like. Now you have a guy like Nemours Jean-Baptiste, who came from very poor origins, and he had the bright idea to come up with a purely Haitian rhythm. And the easiest thing for him to do was to take the Dominican merengue, which was very popular at the time, and he had the bright idea to slow it down considerably. And he added some portions of Haitian, I mean, traditionally Haitian rhythms, and he mixed them. And this is how compa was born in 1956.
Okay, so
That
he
was wrong. Sorry about that.
it's fine. We're learning. So Compa was born. He has his band. He plays this rhythm that is called compa. He plays in a different location. One of them is Ocalbas at Port-au-Prince,
Yeah.
and then at some point he named the band Ensemble au Calvas.
Yeah.
That became Ensemble Nemours Jean-Baptiste, and he had several bandmates, including one of them, which is Weber Siko.
Yeah.
But very quickly, they part ways. Weber Siko left and went with a solo career, playing something similar to the compas of Nemours, but he called it differently.
Yes.
Okay, and was it really a difference between what Weber was playing in Nemours, or it was just a different name? He called it the rampa,
Yeah. Cadence Rampa, he
the
called it.
cadence rampa.
Okay, and Cadence Compa, was it was pretty much the same rhythm as compa, but the conga, which is the basis for compa, was played in a way, and the conga in Cadence Compa was played somewhat differently. But the differences were much bigger. They were pretty much philosophical also. They were musical also, meaning that uh, Weber Siko was a much better musician than Nemours ever was.
Okay.
And but he was more technically proficient on the saxophone. He was a better arranger, but he also was more complicated than Nemours was. And Nemours was pretty much using rhythms that were from the streets. So in essence, the music of Nemours to this day is much more popular than the music from Weber Siko, which doesn't take anything from the music from the founder or from Weber Siko, but it truly was a difference in style and a difference in education. Weber Siko was, and to this day, is considered one of the prime, the best saxophonists that this country, meaning Haiti, ever had. But his music was also more refined, and the influences were much more. He reached out more to international influences than Nemours ever could. So this is really what the difference was.
Yeah, but speaking of influence international, but even the Nemours song, they got very popular and very quickly. Like
Yes.
people all around Aruba, Martinique, Guadeloupe, they picked up Nemours song, and even Nemours with his band, they went and traveled and toured there. But the musician in these countries even interpreted Nemours song and got very popular with his songs.
Well, you could say the same thing about Weber Siko's rhythm also. His rhythm was called cadence compas, and in Dominica, in the 70s, there is a fabulous rhythm that came out of there that was called cadence lipso, just because they wanted to mix calypso with cadence compas.
Oh,
And this is also, when super bands from Dominica and the English French Caribbean came out. I'm talking about the Exile One and the Gramax from famous singer Gordon Henderson. But they both had a tremendous amount of influence. For a long while, people thought that Nemours Jean-Baptiste actually came from Martinique. And I have to tell you, for a long while also, Weber Siko went and actually lived in Martinique and Guadeloupe. So you had a bunch of musicians from the first band that created Compa that pretty much lived for years in Guadeloupe and Martinique, and to this day you have musicians from these that live there. So there was also it was very attractive to Creole people from all over the world, but particularly in the French Caribbean.
nice, interesting. One thing that always struck me, and it never really sat with me, is these men. They used to call it mini jazz. So when I was young, when I heard mini jazz first time, I would think about small bands, two, three musicians. But actually, when you look at the composition of these bands, they were like several, like almost an orchestra. So how do you understand the terminology and how these bands used to play, like with all the horn section, the
Well,
brass, the sax?
let me recap for you.
Mm-hmm.
There are different schools in the compa history. The first compa bands were like big bands from Havana, big bands from the U.S. They were bands, centered around brass sections, around saxophones, trumpets, trombones, big bands, and they introduced elements of Haitian African culture, which was the conga primarily. This was from 1956 until 1960. In the 60s, you had the British invasion, meaning the Beatles came about, the Rolling Stones, and whatnot. And this tremendously influenced Haitian music and compa in particular also. And this is when the mini jazz came, the mini jazz term came. And mini jazz was like, okay, jazz pretty much doesn't mean just jazz, it means bands in Haiti. So you had mini bands. And the reason for it is that, the Beatles were called the Fab Four. You had two guys playing the guitar, one singing, one bass player, and one drummer. In compa, the same thing came about. They canceled the horns and all the arrangements. You had probably two guitars, one bass. You had to have the conga, and you had a drummer. So they were much smaller than what Nemours had envisioned. And that's when you had, a craze that invaded compa pretty much. And that's when you had some bands come about like Schleu Schleu, like Ibo Combo, and they had different influences also. They turned their influences from the Latin style, and they adopted styles from Great Britain, from the U.S. They were very, very influenced by the Yeye period in France, where the Yeye period itself was very influenced by the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and that influence lasted all throughout the 60s. So this is the second aspect of compa. Okay, and
So
there
you're
is a
talking
third
about
one.
the
There's a
bands
fourth
like
one.
Les Coventon, Les
Yeah,
Difficiles, Les Loups
there
Noirs,
you.
Vert des Gens.
No, you're not there yet. You're not there yet.
Not there yet.
This is going to happen after. These guys are going to come when, ironically, you had Cadence Compa that pretty much influenced a band like Exile, one that came from Dominica. And Dominica became an instant hit in Haiti. So, when they invaded Haitian airwaves, because they had a format, they introduced the synthesizer, meaning electronic keyboards. That was never heard of in Haitian music. So, they went back to the format, the mini jazz format, the mini band format, and they added pretty much keyboards and whatnot. And that's when you had bands like Frère Desjans. That's when bands like Tabou Combo came about. You had bands like DP Express and Scorpio. I mean, all these bands pretty much, the center point of the band became the
The
keyboard player.
synthesizers.
And they had like an American horn. When I say American, I want to quote unquote what I'm saying here. They had an American horn section. You had a pop horn section, meaning trombone, sax, and trumpet, not the big band format that they had. So this is when, in the US, you had influential bands that had the same format, like James Brown, like the Commodores, like Earth, Wind, and Fire. And these things were very, very influential in the 70s music, and then in 70s compa. And this is when I would say compa pretty much tried to have a global audience, and they almost reached that global audience with a band like
Speaking
Tabu Compa.
exactly, I was gonna get there with the global audience. So music travels. Like you get the influence from outside, and what you create with your influence others. So I would say it's exactly what happened would have been like Tabu Combo, because he got all the influence, the American or the British influence we were talking about, and the synthesizer and whatever. But then Tabu Combo kind of exploded internationally, if I could say it like that. So how did it really happen? And yeah,
Well, Tabu Combo pretty much originated in Haiti, and you have to understand that this is also linked to politics and all. They actually won a contest at the only television station that existed at the time in Haiti, which was Tele Haiti, and they became first. But the parents were of these guys that were around 18, 19. They were really uneasy about the guys going into music full time because it wasn't something really well seen by in Haitian culture. So all of these guys, because of the music situation, but also because the country was under ruthless dictatorship at the time, they decided to send the youngsters to Canada and to New York to further their studies. And I think I lost you for a second here. No?
No, no, you're here. I hear you.
Okay. But at the same time, what happened is that, they when they went to the US, the guys got together. But at the time, this is when, Sly and the Family Stone, um, uh, the Commodores, Earth, Wind and Fire. This is when the Jacksons. This is when these guys were taking off, and of course, Tabu Combo patterned themselves after. They patterned their sound after these influences, and pretty much Compa was had a new life from one day to the next. And they went for a trip to France, and they were quote unquote discovered by a famous record producer, Barclay, who signed them. And they had I think the biggest hit that Compa has ever had, which was New York City, which went platinum in France and in many countries in Europe. So that was pretty much when Compa almost went global. But there was nobody else could do what Tabu Combo at the time did. So there was no additional, I would say, accompaniment from other bands to pretty much add on to what Tabu Combo did. So this was short lived, but this was their claim to fame, basically.
Okay, we just have Power Surge who just joined.
Hey,
I don't know if you can hear me. Serge, you there? Okay, we can see Serge. We cannot yet hear you. We don't hear you yet. People have to know while we're talking about Tabo Combo and influencing international or whatever. Serge here is one of the rare
Can you hear me now?
Haitian producer. Yeah. I hear you. We're here now.
Awesome.
Who got to secure a deal with one of his production in movies in Hollywood. Okay, which is something huge, I would say. So Serge will talk about that a little bit later. Um, so now we're gonna talk about the transition from what we would call the mini jazz or the band from the 70s and late 70s with and then what came the band in the 80s. Okay, Serge and I weren't born yet still, but
I was born in the 80s. My first time.
we're no
In
no
the
no we were
80s.
born mid
Mid
80s mid 80s.
mid
okay.
So
at
the
least.
bands they call the new generation, nouvelle génération bands.
Yeah.
Okay, here I have in mind the bands like Papash, Isekle, um, could I say music?
Probably, yes, probably. Well, listen, at the end of the 70s, there was also, because Haitian music has always been influenced by external factors also. But at the end of the 70s, you had the new wave craze hitting the US also. So you had, this is when Prince, Michael Jackson, and music was becoming increasingly electronic. And you had like, avant-garde musicians in Haiti also, like the guys from Zekle, Joël, Mouchi, Widmeyer, and Raoul Denis, who came pretty much from one day to the next with a new sound and a very sound that was claiming to bring different stuff to compa. I mean, what they were talking about was different. The lyrics were different. The compositions were much more elaborate, but it was also very popish. So they were pretty much packaging compa in a new format also. But at the same time, in the Caribbean, you had a powerhouse named Kassav that was coming out with a fresh sound that was very reminiscent of compa, with about the same rhythm signature, but also with a very popish sound, meaning that it wasn't as complicated for foreigners to understand what was going on. And that also had a major influence in Haiti and in young musicians. What also happened is that in the mid 80s, Haiti was going to go through a major change politically speaking. The dictatorship of Jean-Claude Duvalier and his dad that lasted for about 30 years was going to collapse pretty much not from one day to the next, but very suddenly, when people were not expecting it to. And that also opened up, the airwaves to a type of music that was, I'm not going to say banned, but was not encouraged. So you, at the same time, you had Kassav come in with a new sound, and you had young creators and people that were banned from the airwaves that were coming with sounds that were never on the airwaves, pretty much. So that pretty much was, people were thinking that at the time Compa was on its deathbed, but actually what that did, it pretty much gave a new life to what Compa was at the time. Of course, it was a different format. It became very electronic with different
I was
sounds.
just about to talk about the format because
Yeah.
these band that you named, some of them were still playing full band. When I say full band, with the full drums, a lot of synthesizers.
Well, at the time, it wasn't much programming or computer programming, but you have to understand that there were more keyboards, more synths than there were before in Compa. And the structure was much different. The guitars were playing a little bit differently, and especially the themes that were being developed were different than the traditional stuff from the 60s and the 70s, which was mostly centered around love and women. So there were social themes, there were different themes being developed, and you had, it's like the whole music changed, and also the format of the songs themselves was changing. They realized that in order to get royalties and to get paid properly with the radio stations, the songs had to be shorter. The catchphrases had to come earlier. So in terms of production, also, the authors and the composers were thinking differently. They were thinking already of a global market, which not didn't materialize immediately, but they were taking lessons from what Zouk had become, because the Zouk songs were short and sweet, and they were racking up tons of royalties, whereas compa authors were hardly making any money from their creations.
Okay, so to give people a sense of what we're really talking about, because it's very heavy in terms of
Yeah.
the music, whatever. So we went from this type of music from Nemours. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Mamita Cowell, me quiere coger, habla siempre de ti, se está volviendo loco. Mamita querida, eres buena moza, si coge te quiere, quiere también querida. Quisiera que de verdad haga un por eso. Por esta mucha prisa es porque quiere casarse. Quisiera que de verdad haga un por eso. Porque ya ciego de ti y piensa siempre en ti. Quisiera que
And now, about 30 years later, in the 80s, we went to this type of song.
la vie est belle pour moi. Tout ça me gagne, c'est pour moi, tout ça me fait pour vous, tout en moi. Les moins t'es dans la mer, pas de chambre pour nous t'a quitté.
So this song, Ooh La La from Sweet Mickey, it's Fabrice Rouzier's production. How did it came about?
Ooh, listen, this is actually it was an accident happening. This is I knew the former president of Haiti, Mr. Michel Martelly. I knew him. We're not from the same generation exactly, but I knew him as a kid. And he approached me one day just to say, "Hey, I know that you're familiar with studio techniques and whatnot. I just got into it. I need to make a record." I'm like, "Well, why don't you come to my place and we'll figure out what you want to do?" And it was a Thursday, and that Thursday we started jamming. I had a small keyboard, not much in terms of programming. We did a few songs. He had just rough ideas, and he said, "Okay, we need to go to the studio right now." I'm like, "Well, we're not done. We need to arrange them." And the second night, because he's a very demanding human being, as you guys know, we went in the studio, and we worked on the song. We worked on 6 songs right then and there. And I was done. I called a friend of mine who played the guitar, Keke Belizer, a guy who was also a musician, and immediately paying attention to it. I was in college then, so I traveled back to the States to go to college. And about 4 months after, people were it was before the internet, so I had no idea what was going on in other markets. And they were telling me, "Man, there is the next craze in Haitian clubs in New York is Ooh La La by Sweet Mickey." I'm like, "Who is that?" And and then I'm like, I need to hear that. Please bring me a tape or whatever. And sure enough, 2 days later, the guy shows up with a tape, and I'm like, "Wow, this sounds
Got
eerily like
something
something
for
that
you.
I've done." So that
Sorry.
was it.
Mhm.
So I had no idea that it was a major success until I got back to Haiti the following summer. So that it's to tell you that I didn't take it seriously at all. So but he became probably one of the most successful artists in our generation. I think.
Personally, that's Ooh La La. It was one of the first song as young kid. I remember one of the first song I would perceive, and he also had a video or whatever. And
Right.
at that time, we were in the moment where a lot of band with heavy digital component, the keyboard, the what we call the drum machine, is the electronic beat machine that would replace the the
Yeah. The
percussion
drummer,
of the band,
yeah,
the full
yeah.
drum set, the congas and cowbells.
That's correct.
And that's when
That's
Serge and I, still in mid school or high school, we were doing music in school. Serge, and as a way to introduce yourself in the conversation, what was the first compa music or compa band with drum machine that certainly influenced you in starting to influence how you play, decide to play in the first place?
First thing is, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be a part of this panel with the legend like Fabrice. Pour faire musique nous non jusqu'à présent, but we're gonna work on that. And Ricky, thank you also for inviting me. To answer your question, first band, like Kashan would say, electronic, digital band, was digital for sure. Definitely with Rouzier, who's a very big influence in my style of playing. And he used to live not too far from my house. So growing up, I used to be at his studio all the time. So he definitely influenced my style a lot. And his type of music with his band was definitely in me. Of course, Fabrice with his songs with Mickey, those were very influential as well. And that was our time. Our era was more of the Sweet Mickey device. Um, that's when we were really appreciating music, and especially as for us producers, when we, dived into the composition of compa production, the bands that were very very popular, Sweet Mickey, Vice, etc. Definitely, I have very digital was the band for me. Especially that
I'm
I looked
glad you
up a lot
mentioned
to.
digital because I know, especially for a lot of keyboard players in our generation, in Institut Mercier from Digital Express is the model. Right there with Fabrice Rouzier. Every young keyboard player will tell you that. And Yes,
I would say
digital.
it's Messi and Ronaldo,
Messi and
definitely of
Cristiano
the
Ronaldo.
of the
That's
most
exactly
famous.
what it is. and and Digital Express, the name wasn't chosen lightly, we could say, because the band was very digital. And a guy like Ancito Mercier, it's like he had 20 fingers, and he would used to play with a lot of keyboards and a lot of programming. And just to give a sense of how digital his sound was, let's hear it. So here we're in the late 80s, probably early 90s, and it's already sounds so modern, and it's basically, I think, except for the cymbals, all that we're hearing right now, it's fully digital. So that was very an influence for me, and definitely T-Vice with Nikki, of course. Um, and then we're gonna go later to the Compa Creole and stuff. But I have a question for Fabrice. At this time, the drum machine format was very popular. And even Sweet Mickey, which was one of your a rival of your band, Music, at some point, especially during Carnival season, was drum machine. But Music, you never decided to go that route. And was there a particular reason for it?
Well, let me tell you, this is not completely accurate, but you know, I just want to mention one person that was very influential in that style also, and that one person is Robert Charlot from the group Top Vice, which was with legendary guitarist Robert Martineau and Robert Charlot himself, a great keyboard player and programmer in his own right. We actually started with drum machines, and we were going to have a three-piece band when we started the band, but unfortunately none of us could sing. But I have to tell you, as we were rehearsing, and this was during the embargo years in Haiti, I was we were rehearsing, just the three of us, a simple drum machine, a bass player, and Keke Belize on the guitar. And the best percussionist that Haiti's ever known, his name is Shupi Jacquet. He plays the gong. The gong is a cowbell and a floor tom. And what this guy does is still unmatched to this day. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 years ago. And he came to our rehearsal and he said, "You turn off that damn piece of blank, and you let me play." And basically that was history. And when he started playing, he played along with the drum machine, and we realized that this was no match. He's playing, you could do whatever amount of programming you wanted, but you couldn't match his energy and what he brought to the table. So we decided to have a drummer. And the drummer that we had originally was just a friend that could hit a few cymbals, but he couldn't do much. And we had one of the legendary conga players that also came to the rehearsals, and they pretty much, I'm not going to say forced themselves upon us, but that was basically it. So we were like, wow, how can we do with that? And we decided to change the format. But I have to be honest with you guys. What we did, we started with the drum machine format. I think I am the first guy that came to Haiti with an Roland R8. The musicians out there are gonna know what it is, and with various other drum machines, because I am a programmer first and foremost. But I have to tell you, up to this day, the band is just turned 34. We're discussing using Ableton tracks live, and this is like for some of the musicians in the band, and they're like, never, man, we can't go back to this. It's like, it's a difference in perception. But I have to be honest with you, it makes things easier. But the live playing, when you have interaction with the players, there is nothing that can change that. But most of our records, I'm not going to say most, all of our records are sequenced. So it really, it's some of the items are replaced by players, But the rough sketches, just to be honest, are always done with computer programming, unfortunately. But that also has to do with the fact that it's very hard to find a studio like that could recreate what we would like to do with a full live band. I'm
The
sure we
full
could
live
have,
performance.
but there you go. Yeah, it's just a choice.
So Serge, mid school, you start your home band with drum machine. It was Suave. I remember it because we went to the same school. Tell us a little bit about it, how it was, and how it came about, how it ended.
All right. Suave. It was my first experience as a keyboard player, leading a band, and also as a producer. First song I did was From Sa. I was about 12 years old. I remember we wrote the song together as a team, as a group, on the under the Prio in Saint Louis Gonzague and my school. Um, we wrote the song there. And the band started really out of me being passionate about making music, and I found some friends in school that were just as passionate, and we decided together to do something. I had a little keyboard. It was a Yamaha PSR 5. Never gonna forget that keyboard. There you go.
Sorry to interrupt. This song, exactly the song you're talking about.
So
Yeah, sorry, continue.
it's okay. So that was my first song that I ever produced in my life. I was about 12 years old. And when I produced this song again, my keyboard was the Yamaha PSR. It was their introductory keyboard to sequencing and programming. And that's what I actually used to perform live. And I only had three different things, three different patterns that I could have on this sequencer. So I had to be very creative on what patterns to use and how long to make and things like that. So it forced me to be very creative on how to program. And I also had different drum machine. Machine was a Alesis S16. If you guys know that drum machine, it's a very small drum machine. And then I graduated to the R5, Roland R5. And then after that, of course,
Graduated.
the Legend R8 MK2, which was my first big boy machine. And from there, I had the MPC 500, MEC 2000 XL with the floppy. And then from the floppy, I got the Zip with the SCSI. I don't know if you remember that. But it was a great experience. It forced us to be very creative. And I remember one of my biggest performances was Suave and Kali Me. And here I come with my little PSR, and I had a Casio controller. And the guys were like, what is this kid gonna do with like this little control and sequencer? And as soon as I dropped my programming, everybody got up like, how is sound coming from this little thing? So it was a fun experience. And then now, of course, we're all using Logic and Pro Tools and all of Ableton. But yeah, that's how I started. I started really just being passionate, finding friends that were just as passionate as me, and at a very young age. And lucky enough to have a lot of friends that love music and love our movement. And even our rehearsals were like a party. When we were rehearsing, we had like 25, 30 friends sometimes at rehearsal, drinking, having fun, eating, bringing food. That's how I started Suave. And then, of course, after high school, it was more of a high school band. We all went different college, and then the history. I became Power Surge as a
Okay, quick,
producer.
two things. Two things while you're telling the story. First, you mentioned Carry Me, and we cannot have this discussion without mentioning Carry Me because definitely our generation, in terms of outside influence from Haiti, Kaimi was probably one, if not the most popular band, or had the most popular hit in terms of compa. And I don't know if Fabrice would agree with me, but when you see how a song like Bang Bang did, and how many tours the guys have done over about a decade, with their composition, and how it
Well,
influenced a
well,
lot of them.
just I agree fully, and then
Hmm.
Karimi is the direct successor to Tabu Combo, I would imagine, and to
Absolutely, I
Groupe.
agree.
They are probably the band that reached out to a global audience more than for compa more than any other band in history. And I think that they stood on the shoulders of giants, meaning Tabu Combo, but they
Hmm.
probably went further, and they're I think they're I mean, Karimi is gone, but you have the byproducts of Karimi, which are Vibe and Kai,
Hmm.
and they're already onto big things. And I am sure that after the pandemic, and these guys are going to do bigger and better things, because they are also they learn from their elders' mistakes. And I think that they have one thing that probably the generation from the 70s, which to me was the best generation of compa, but they have something that that generation didn't have, and it's the marketing savvy, and they have tools at their disposals, like what we're using right now, social media and marketing, that none of the bands from the 70s had or didn't use actively. And they have the connections, they have the know-how, and I believe that they have the composing savvy, meaning that they know how to get to people. You could argue about the musicality of their pieces, but you cannot argue about the reach of what they create. Meaning that the way that they compose, they know what audience they're looking for. They know how to package it, and it works. So more power to them. And I think that they're going to reach.
I see some comments, people in the audience asking for some audio. Now, in terms of connections, in terms of how to get deals, I think Serge would be a good input in that matter, because Serge here is one of the producers with one of his production, although not compa, but had been able to secure deals with international entities, such as I would call probably the Zumba organization, or in Hollywood, he secured a deal with one of these production and movies. So Serge, what can you say about these?
Um, well, even though my music that was placed in some of these projects were not compa, but I can absolutely say that compa has influenced my production style. Absolutely. I have to sometimes um, keep myself from adding too much compa flavor to my production, because that's what comes to my production. You feel the cadence of the Caribbean influence. So I really like adding that little vibe when I'm producing. And that was always one of my key features as a producer, is I like doing fuse of different genres. So in my compa, you can get a little bit of an R&B world Afro feel to what I'm doing. Of my biggest songs was with Mika Ben and the Haitian market, I'm Loving My Life, and then we had Flying. And so some of those songs, you can feel that I add the Haitian flavor to it. Now, that being said, I was a big fan of trying to push the music out of the industry that we know, the HMI as they call it. And one of the big things, like just to be with Fabrice, marketing, marketing our selling ourselves, reaching out to publicists, reaching out to different ANRs, attending events, performing. So all those things are basically used my advantage when I first started pushing myself as a producer. And doing so opened up a lot of doors for me. Of course, you need to have good music. Essentially, if your music really gonna go anywhere, good music is relative. That's a question of taste. But I would say I'm a perfectionist and I like to make my so but just to agree with Fabrice, a lot of it had to do with marketing and networking and talking to people, selling your vision, telling your story. And I believe it is more about a story than your content. So if you have a good story behind what you're selling, it's easier sold. Sure, if you follow what I'm saying. We're in a trend right now in the world where people are more following stories and the quality of the music right now has to match on social media, and that's what's really is the driving factor to success right now. That's why most people that are successful with their music, they have to have that presence on social media. They have to have that following. Those are very important. So it's a little mixture of everything, but ultimately the music has to be appreciated by consumer.
I want to touch now the point of 2 points. First one is, how about doing what would I call adaptation, which is other genre music, or when you interpret some interpretation of other style of music and you reproduce it in compa. I know Fabrice has done some remix of international songs in compa. I did as well. As let's hear a sample of the compa version of Elo that I did with Tagna Covington.
Tell you I'm sorry for everything that I've done, but when I called, you never seem to be home. Hello from the outside. Yes, I can say that I've tried to tell you I'm sorry for breaking your heart, but
So these mix sometimes get some success, and you see on social media, your views and whatever. But what I really want to talk about is today, compa has influenced several genres around the world. Some people even don't know about. For example, I have kizomba in mind. So first, is it real? This question is for Fabrice. Is it real that many genres that are playing right now, whether it's in the Caribbean or some part of Europe, or direct from compa, the zouk and stuff, and why isn't why it is not really known, okay, directly that that comes from compa?
Well, it's obvious, and the creators will tell you directly that they are being influenced by compa. But you have to understand that compa as a format has not crossed over for specific reasons. And one of the primary reasons why it hasn't crossed over is that compa as a genre, as a format, is too long. The songs are over 5 minutes long because we have the way that we dance, and this is the way it's translated directly into the radio. And of course, if you're gonna play it on the internet, you're gonna go on YouTube. Anything longer than 3 minutes is gonna bore you, and the audience is gonna be turned off by it. So the people that have been influenced by compa, they will admit it. It's not a question of not admitting it. It's a question of being formatted as compa and being sold to the world. But it's I guess the creators that are coming up, I'm thinking of the Carimis or the Impossible to say it bluntly, because they are the ones really bringing forth new air, a new genre of compa these days. They know that they have to format it in a way for an audience to pretty much get accustomed to it and accept it. So this is necessary. I don't think that it's going to happen by doing let's say mashups of popular pop songs. I think that we have what it takes. I think that many of compas songs throughout the years have been let's say interpreted by Latin bands, even by rock bands. You had Santana doing a cover of Tabu Combo. You had Juan Luis Guerra doing covers of Nemours Jean-Baptiste, which we were talking to. So it's been happening all throughout the years. Very famous artists just taking snippets of compa and playing them on world stages. But you have to understand that they format it so it's acceptable for radio format, so that it's acceptable for YouTube and whatnot. And this is very important for creators of compa to understand that they have to adapt their format to a world market, if that's what they're choosing to target.
Yeah, but what about the genre itself? Really
Well,
never
that's what
got
I'm
the.
saying. That's what I'm saying. The genre cannot cross over unless it fits into a format, and the same could be said of many formats. You had the ska format from Jamaica. The songs were as long as compa until they understood that they had to keep them 3 minutes long for them to be able to be played on the radio. That's when reggae came up, and the successful reggae acts like Marley, like Third World, like Steel Pulse, their songs were very, very short. Of course, when they were in a concert format, they would extend it, many times. You have for soca, it was the same thing, and when Feeling Hot came on, it was a very short song and it was played everywhere and it was played 1,000 times. But if it was like a 9-minute remix, I guarantee it to you, it wouldn't be played anywhere. But people around the Caribbean understood it, and even salseros. You're thinking of the Fania All Stars, Mark Anthony, Luis Enrique. These people, when they were doing their songs, back in the day, salsas were 6-7 minute numbers, until they understood that they had to make them shorter, just to give the audience a chance of accepting, not being bored with the song, because this is very, very important in the realm of, this is one of the aspects that compa needs to work on, and I think that the young creators are working on that right now.
Okay, so you already answered my next question. Would be the future of compa in
Well,
your
the
mind?
future of compa is here, and we're listening to it. Unfortunately, because of the social political upheaval in Haiti, as you know, and as you've said quite eloquently, I talked about my experience, but both you and Power Serge talked about the way you guys started. It's a group of friends. Unfortunately, because of the social problems and the security issues in Haiti that has been occurring for the past 20 years, it's very hard for young kids to get together and set up a compa band. It's easier for a guy to stay in his bedroom with a laptop and become a DJ or a producer, but it's no longer feasible for bands to be created from a group of high school friends or guys from the same neighborhood, just like it used to happen. And that was, if I truly believe that this was the lifeblood of what we call compa, and that happened all across the country. This is exactly how the biggest bands in compa were created. But right now, it's just a bunch of guys with a laptop, and unfortunately,
The way
you
you
can
say
do
it doesn't
compa
really
with.
make me feel good because I
Uh,
produce 90% of
well,
my production
I'm
from the
not saying
laptop.
producer. No, this is not what I'm saying, Ricky. You have me wrong. I'm
Hmm.
saying
Talk
that the
about the
bands
social
are
aspect.
I'm talking about the social aspect, exactly.
Hmm.
Because if you get together with your friends instead of staying
Definitely.
behind a laptop, first and foremost, if you're the one that owns the laptop, you're the ones with the ideas. So the bass player is not going to have any input. The percussion player is not going to have any input. And you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And until that changes, there is a serious problem with compa, and there is a serious problem with world music as a whole. Because if you're thinking of pop, you no longer have garage band bands, because most bands were born out of garage. Because in the US, it's not like in the Caribbean where we are, where you can play music at any level, at any time of the day or night. Okay, you have to be confined to a garage. Okay, but in Haiti and in many parts of the world where compa bands were started, it's a group of friends that create that. And with the booze, with the food, it's a social environment. It's a group of friends, not necessarily the most proficient musicians, but necessarily a group of friends that came up with an idea. And that's what, that's the basis for compa band. But, I think Steve Jobs really did us a disservice in the compa industry, by creating that, that MacBook. And it's a fortunate instrument, but it's also an omen for compa, unfortunately.
Serge, the future
Coronavirus
of
is not
compa.
helping either.
Well, that's true too.
Serge, the future of compa in your mind.
Wow. That's a tough. The future of compa, from a pipe, Fabrice, the soul aspect is where it's at. I believe it's very important. But with the technology that we have now, look at how we're on Zoom right now talking. I think your minds can be very creative on how to use the technology to their advantage, and then create with these tools. It's a world we're living in that we have these tools and we just will adapt. It's like some could Compa died when the machine was introduced. It's like some
Well,
people would say.
Well, I predicted about 4 years ago that we were the last generation to play compa. So I was dead wrong. I'm sorry for having said that.
Hopefully
Thank
you were
God.
wrong. Fortunately, you were
Well, I
wrong.
think Compa has a fight right now with imposition, which to me is doing very well, and their music is really nice. And I believe they have the capacity to cross over. Their style is very young, is very world. People
But
are accepting it, and
the only issue is that we need maybe 17 bands like Impossible, and we only have one. What I was saying, and the reason why I was saying that compa is a dying genre, unfortunately, and I'm going to explain myself, is that the musicians playing compa are 35 or older, while the audience is 17 to 25. I mean, you understand what I'm saying. So there is like a discrepancy between the age of the performers and the age of the listeners, and the listeners are really relating to people that are pretty much in their age range. So when you have people 17 or 12 to 25 listening to 35, 50, 60-year-olds, it doesn't really compute in my mind. So, we have, and there is a need for Haitians abroad, for compa lovers, regardless of if they're Haitians or not, to encourage the remaining compa creators, and by encouraging the youth also, the young people from Haiti, and the young people, when I say the young people, the young compa lovers, let's put it that way, to create compa. And this is done through contests. And unfortunately, we are in a country that has been without proper leadership for the past 50 years. And that has been true also in the cultural world. So if we don't have, people that take the leadership and give a spot for youngsters to value their heritage, and in their heritage, compa is also a very strong portion of that heritage. If we don't have people that that take the leadership to promote that, unfortunately, it's going to spell trouble for the compa world also.
My thought on this is that in my mind, compa has a bright future because there's always going to be the need for that gouye. Okay, compa is the genre that bring two people together on a dance floor, and as long as this need is still going to be there and people still going to be producing for that need, there's a future for it.
I beg to differ, but I will respect your opinion. But what I'm going to say to you is that you have fewer and fewer people that will attend parties, and Haitian parties are the only parties in the world where people dance in the dark completely, and God knows what happens in the dark. I mean, it's sexy. Many young kids are born out of this state of things, but it's only for a definite audience. That also has to do with the fact that the Haitian diaspora are pretty much everywhere, meaning the diaspora that's in the US, the ones that are right now in Chile, in Brazil, they're gonna have kids, but the kids have a complete disconnect with the homeland, with Haiti. So they no longer are interested in what Fabrice Rouzier or Maestroricky or Serge is creating out of Haiti. They're just going to be interested in what their newfound country is producing. So my dream, I'm a big lover of Brazilian music, and when I went to Brazil a couple of years back, I went to play music for the Haitian community. I was told that there were 70,000 Haitians in Brazil, and to me, Brazilian music is among the most beautiful music in the world. And I know that in the 60s, mind you guys, there was a lot of Brazilian influence in Haitian compa, and a band like Ibu Combo comes to mind. And I went like, that wouldn't that be beautiful if because of the diaspora that's in Brazil, you would have a mix of Brazilian bossa nova and compa. That would be awesome. It would be a godsend. But what
In regard to what you just said, we just had a comment from the people that said they hear what you're saying in
Yeah.
terms of the kids born here, not really connected to what you're doing in Haiti, but there's bands here also in the diaspora. Saint Cloud, for example, comes in mind that
Yeah,
keep
agree.
that keep these young Haitians connected to what Haiti's doing, even if the bands are not in Haiti themselves.
Listen, I value what they do. I listen to Saint Laurent a whole lot also. But I doubt that, it has to be a movement. When in the 70s, when compa was very strong in the US and in the American diaspora and the diaspora in French, you had about, I would say, not exaggerating, about 20 bands that were performing at an equal level in the 70s and that were not from Haiti. You had, and mostly, and the capital of compa at the time was New York. Okay, right now, if you go to New York in any given day, we're talking pre-COVID. Okay, you will find maybe, I would say, two bands at best that play in New York. Okay, so New York no longer is a market for Haitian compa. Miami, which became de facto the market for Haitian compa, maybe has one party with maybe two or three bands in order to attract the same number of people. Back in the 70s and the 80s, guys, you could have three bands playing at different clubs with an equal number of attendance. So, the attendance is going down quite substantially, even though the population has grown exponentially in these markets also. But population has grown exponentially with people of Haitian descent, not Haitians. That makes a whole lot of difference. And I hope what I'm saying is not true, but I'm looking at numbers. I'm not looking at, the quality of the music or whatever. I'm looking at attendance. And right now you have to consider that we have bigger events right now for Haitian compa than we ever had. We have the Haitian Compa Festival in Miami that draws about 20,000 people every year. That never ever happened in the 70s or the 80s. But collectively, they had more of an audience and they reached much, many more people than they reach right now physically. And without the internet also. So that has to be considered.
Right. So
I'm sorry to be dark, but I am pleading for a future, and I'm thinking that there is an effort that needs to be made. I know that saying that the people responsible for cultural politics here should do it. Their beautiful track record for the past 30 years, so we can count on them. We can count on ourselves. I can count on Serge. I can count on Yuki. I can count on myself to try and promote compa. And I think that the best way to promote compa is to listen to what people have done and are continuing to do. So, there is, in that sense, I will agree with you. When there is only one band that has success, it's a bright future for compa. So hooray for Impossible, hooray for Kai and Vibe and New Look and Class. So they have my backing, and I support them as much as I can. But I would hope that every single Haitian would do the same thing. And that's where it's very important. It's the survival of the Haitian soul that's at hand. And I know that it's the same in every single market also, guys. I know that Zouk, as popular as it is in Portugal, in some West African countries, but in Martinique and Guadeloupe, you have, Zouk is really dead, and compa is actually more prevalent than Zouk in these countries. So that should tell you something. Enough talking for me.
That was
Well,
good stuff.
yeah, it was good talking, and we're gonna end the discussion with a brighter light. Even probably ended with a kind of a bright light, because it says that the Compas still have a future and to produce over time and still have its influence over other culture. And I prepared a little logic session and to make people have a sense of how we do it these days, even in this type of COVID. Okay, I'm here in Florida in the US, but compa still being produced. I'm being told it's time. Guys, I want to say thank you. It was a pleasure to have you for the discussion. And thank you, Fabrice. Fabrice probably is going to show us something. Thank you, Serge. And thank you, the Black Consciousness Festival. I already see the ladies there. Thank you for welcoming us, introducing us. And Serge,
Thank
you
you.
came last, another three. You're going to start the end.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure. Again, Fabrice, it was a pleasure to. I'm happy to see you. Great. Thank you, the host, and hopefully that again soon. I learned a lot today, and hopefully, like Fabrice said, Compa has a bright future, and want to support and help because this is of the Haitian soul, the soul of Haitian's culture that's at stake, and that's my takeaway from tonight, and that's gonna be my motivator to keep working and to keep being active as well. I love it.
Okay. I just want to remind you, Compa is not over with the Black Consciousness Festival because on Saturday we're gonna have the DJ in the dance, and there's gonna be a DJ playing Compa. It will be DJ Ecstasy from Florida and Jacksonville, and I will be there with him and putting some grooves, some solos on his looping beats. So Compa, looking forward to see you on Saturday. Thanks again, Fabrice. Thanks, Serge. Thank you, the Black Consciousness Festival.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, you guys.
So this has been an enlivening session. We have learned so much about the compa industry. We learned about the history, the musicians, and the development of compa, something we always be grateful for. I particularly enjoyed the point that social media is essential in a new musician's career, and especially in broadcasting the music. So my question is, what advice can you share to newer musicians?
Well, aspiring musicians have to be, they have to learn their craft first also, meaning that they have to be very in tune with what music is doing, but you have to know your instrument basically. And whether it's musicians from Trinidad, from Martinique, from Jamaica, or from anywhere, you have to be aware of your past also. You have to be very curious of your past in order to go further.
Well said.
Also, what do you think about the Black Consciousness Festival, and can you elaborate on its importance?
Can you repeat the question?
What do you think about the Black Consciousness Festival, and how can you elaborate on its importance?
It is vital to have a Black consciousness, but to have a festival promoting it is even much better, because Black consciousness is. I mean, you look around the world right now. You look at what, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement has spurred, not just in the U.S. but also in the world. Just think of what people will find out when they're aware of what Black people have brought to the table, generally in terms of invention, in terms of culture, and in terms of, you name it, food. So it's amazing. I'm really hoping that at some point let's get this COVID out of the way so that we can sample this live. And it's very important, and I commend you guys for doing this. And like they say in French, chapeau bas.
Thank you, guys.
Also, what do you think, Maestro, and also Serge?
Well, Fabrice said it then perfectly, very eloquently. It is always important to remind people, to remind the world what we as Black people bring to the table, and in absolutely every aspect of it, sports, culture in particular. Okay, culinary.
Food.
So exactly, definitely. So yeah, it is what it is, and the Black Consciousness Festival should continue. Um, Live, like in person, next time, hopefully without COVID. But it's very important movement, and I was very honored to be invited to come and talk about my culture and my work in the culture. And I was very honored to have with me two of the best in the industry. So thanks again.
Definitely. Thank you so much. So hearing you all emphasize on how Compa has not only impacted your life, but the entire global landscape has truly been amazing. We appreciate you all for being here tonight and sharing your knowledge on Compa music. So thank you again for the positive energy, good information, and relaxed atmosphere.
Thank you again.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you to our amazing audience for joining the Black Consciousness Festival's Konpa workshop. We had 3 excellent musicians, Maestro, Ricky, Fabrice, Rouzier, and Serge.
Stay tuned to our exciting schedule. Get more information on the beautiful people around the world that are collaborating to make the festival happen, and register for our upcoming conversations and activities at our website, www.theblackconsciousnessfestival.com, Facebook page, YouTube channel, Instagram profile, Twitter, and LinkedIn pages.
Have a good night, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and walk in pride, power, and practice.